If you watch any YouTube video or read any book on communication skills, the first thing they will tell you to do is to ask more questions. But the problem with this, if you're anything like me, is when you try it in conversation, it goes something like this.
Can I help you?
I don't know. Can you?
Are you looking for something?
Is there something I should be looking for?
Oh, we have a lot of books, so maybe it depends on what you like.
What do you like?
The basic advice is good, but how do you actually think of questions to ask in conversation? How do you know when to ask them and how often to ask them? And how do you know what questions are good? It's something that puzzled me, and through lots of trial and error and watching YouTube videos, I've gotten a lot better at asking good questions. And this is what I've learned. The most important thing to remember is if the conversation isn't going well, it might not be your fault. In fact, more often than you think, it is probably not your fault. The other person might not know how to ask good questions either. They might be really anxious and focused on their self. There's a whole bunch of other things. They could be having a bad day. There's a whole bunch of other things that could be going on. Maybe you don't have a lot in common. Anyway, you can see I can think of a lot of stuff that would stop the conversation from going well. Sometimes when it's like this, there's just nothing you can do. And the more you think about how you're ruining the conversation and it's all your fault, the less you can keep the conversation going because you're not focused on the conversation, you're focused on how you're ruining it. So pat yourself on the back. It's okay. And I'm going to come back to how you can actually get them to talk more if it is kind of their problem. However, some of the time, there is some stuff you can do to build the skill of conversation so that you can keep them going longer and have higher quality conversations. The first thing you can do, which is about 2/3 of the whole thing, is to be more confident. So confidence, I've got a little analogy for you guys. When you have low confidence, your filter essentially is too strong. So you think of what to say, you think of questions to ask, but you can't get them out. And a good analogy for this is, imagine you are like trying to get into a nightclub and there's some bouncer that is being really mean and is turning everyone away unless you're like a really like attractive 10 out of 10 girl. If the bouncer is too mean and is turning away too many people, there's only going to be like 2 people inside the club and it's going to be dead. There's nothing wrong with the people in the line, the questions in your head, the thoughts in your head, but you just can't get them out because of your low confidence. So when you're trying to have better conversations, about 2/3 of your improvement will come from becoming more confident. And the other third will come from improving the skill of conversations. So this is improving the thoughts in your head and the questions you can ask, getting better at that stuff, which is kind of the same from this analogy, getting better people in the line so that the bouncer is more likely to let them through. Now, with the confidence stuff out of the way, how do you improve this last third, the skill of conversations and asking questions? If you're struggling to think of questions to ask in conversation, a good tip I've learned recently is to only ask questions about the last minute of what they said. So don't think about like half an hour ago what they said, just what did they say very recently? And to explain this, I'll give a quick analogy. There was once a shoe salesman who was really good. He was like the best in town. And so the news came and asked him, how did you get so good? Like, how do you sell so many shoes? And he said 2, not 3. And they were really confused and they asked him to elaborate. And he said 2 options, not 3. You know, people trying on shoes, they would always ask like, oh, can I try on that one as well? And can I try on that one? And he noticed that when it got to 3 pairs in front of them, they were less likely to make a decision than if they just had 2 pairs. And so what he learned was whenever they asked for another pair, he would say, which one do you want to get rid of? And this was a really clever way of narrowing down the possible choices to increase the chance of actually making a choice, which is what you need to do. You can't just be thinking in conversation. You need to make a decision quickly on the spot so there's no silences. And this is why restricting it to the last minute of conversation can be good. Of course, you only use this when you're actually struggling. Like if you can think of something to ask that was a while ago, don't worry about this. It's only for when you're struggling. Another great tip on how to ask questions that will keep the conversation going is to use statement questions. Basically, what these are is instead of asking questions, so for example, how are you? How was your day? What's your favorite color? You might say, my favorite color is blue. Obviously, that's stupid because like that's just out of nowhere. You don't use these for initiating. you use them really for follow-up questions. So for example, if the other person says, I'm so tired, instead of asking the question like, oh, really, why are you tired? Which would be a good question. You can vary it up by saying something like, oh yeah, the amount of study they get us to do is just crazy. How do they expect us to sleep? And that's inviting them to go like, yeah, right. And it's a bit of relatability, but they can also keep talking now because you've kind of said a statement. They're not feeling like they're just monologuing for ages from you, all right? Like there's a bit of back and forth. One type of statement question is a compliment. So you can actually just say something nice about them. That'll make them happy. And it's, again, like they probably got a story about whatever you've complimented, or, you know, there's some way for them to continue the conversation. For example, if you compliment like their jewelry or something, they might say, oh, thank you. It was my mom's. I actually like stole it from her. I don't know. And sometimes the issue is not actually asking more questions or using statement questions. It's actually getting the other person to talk for longer. Think about it. If you're in a conversation and you're asking questions like every 5 seconds, it's going to feel like a job interview. It's going to feel like you're just like, you know, constantly just battering them. So if you're just battering them with questions, it might be like that you say something short, they say something short, you say something short, and it's just back and forth constantly. And the conversation is going to die pretty quickly. But what happens when you give longer responses yourself is you invite them to also feel like, yeah, you know what, this is a space where I can like talk for longer. He's listening, and it's a bit of relatability as well because you've talked a bit about yourself. So they basically feel like they can do it, and it's longer back and forth, and that makes it better. Furthermore, doing this, when they give long responses, it's easier to think of questions because they've just told you more. So like there's more topics to ask questions on. Also, when they give these longer answers, you have to reward them for that. It's just like Pavlovian conditioning, you know, like when they do a behavior you want them to repeat, you just make sure the behavior is met with a positive consequence. It's not manipulation, it's just being nice. So if they give a long answer, well, I guess just be honest, and then it's not manipulation. So just go like, oh, really? That's so cool. And like ask follow-up questions to show that you're interested. And if you show that you're interested in something, they're going to keep talking. So even just saying like, that's really cool, might get them to keep talking. And eventually you'll need to say something again, but it really just encourages them to keep talking. And being honest is really important, especially when you're giving your responses. So if you say something really long and it's honest, they feel like they can be honest as well. And they can tell you kind of deeper stuff. And that's, again, improving the conversation. Because if you're just like kind of not dodging the question, not really answering, they don't feel like they're talking to someone they can trust. And you need to build trust to have good conversations. So there's 5 tips. Increase your confidence. Only ask questions about what they said in the last minute. Give statements and compliments instead of just questions. And by the way, with compliments, don't overuse them, only give them when they're genuine, so that this doesn't come across as fake. Reward them for talking. So that's, you know, like going, oh, wow, really cool. And talk more about yourself and be honest and open up and be that relatable person. If you do all these, you should be able to ask better questions and not get stuck with just like job interview conversations and really short ones that don't go well. If that doesn't work, maybe you just need to increase your confidence. And I have a video on that here.